India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship, Young Turks turns 21, and we are back with a brand new season of Voices from the Valley. This season, we bring you stories from the front line of what's being called the biggest technological innovation of our times, generative AI. In this edition of Voices from the Valley, we hear from Celesta Capital and two of its portfolio founders who are leveraging AI in ways never imagined before. We put the spotlight on Prellis and Recogni. The brainchild of an immunologist and biophysicist Melanie Matthew, Prellis is pioneering bioconvergence, which is the coming together of biology and deep tech. Prellis is striving to 3D print human organs such as liver and kidney and thus enable transplants without waitlists. Externalized human immune system is another of Dr. Matthew's breakthroughs, which recreates the human immune system in a petri dish. Investor Celesta Capital says this technology can transform the drug discovery process and become the gold standard in the pharmaceutical industry. Deals have been signed with at least 5 drug companies, including Sanofi and Bristol-Myers Squibb. Moving from solving problems that are truly human to those of machines, Recogni is making vehicles safer, especially the self-driving ones. Founded in 2017, the beating heart of Recogni is its AI chip, which can process high-resolution images of objects up to 1,000 meters in real time. The super chip can process an image to its last pixel in less than 10 milliseconds, which provides ample reaction time for an autonomous car to navigate safely. No wonder Recogni also runs advanced driver assistance systems for a regular car. The leaders of the automobile world have taken notice. BMW and Toyota are investors in Recogni.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Young Turks. I'm Shereen Bhan. As you know, the show has turned 21, and as we usually do, we're back here in the Valley to do our annual trek to gauge what sentiment and mood looks like here and what the opportunities for the India-US startup corridor could potentially be. Nick, Sriram, Mike and Marc, many thanks for joining us here on this special edition of Young Turks. So let's get started. And Nick, I'll start by talking to you because our last conversation happened a few months ago and you were extremely bullish and confident about India. In fact, you said you want to double down on your India investments. What does the story look like today?
Well, we continue to be very excited about India, and it's good to see we're not the only ones that are excited. Lots of other people seem to be coming in and focusing on the opportunities in India. And, you know, the Idea Forge story, along with our first exit there, which was a company called Aura Semiconductor, exemplify the opportunities that we see in India.
What do you make of the strength of the India drone opportunity today?
Well, we think it's very strong. When we made the investment in Idea Forge 6 years ago, we had looked at several drone companies in North America and other geographies, and we did not make any of those investments.
Why not?
Because we felt the market was, at that time, the market had become somewhat crowded. It was hard to differentiate. It was hard to figure out who was likely to win and everybody had a slight competitive advantage, but it was hard to make a bet at that time. It was a little bit mature in terms from an investment perspective. But when we looked at Idea Forge, we felt that the opportunity here was the fact that the Indian requirements were very different from everywhere else. You look at the Indian terrain and some of the other challenges that you face in India, we thought that the successful drone company in India would have to be a local company that understood the Indian dynamics. And so we made that bet. And we thought that the founding team were very smart. They were very inexperienced, but we thought that what they brought was so powerful that the rest could be learned. And so I often tease them that the first 3 years was an investment in their educational fund. and it worked out fantastically. I mean, they've grown into some very good entrepreneurs, very good executives, and we're very excited about it. But the uniqueness of the Indian opportunity was the one that drove us to make this investment. We felt it would be very difficult for one of these established companies to come in and be able to beat a local company because of the unique dynamics of the Indian
Well, speaking of the unique dynamics of the India opportunity, Sriram, let's talk about the other big opportunity that is being put on the table, and that is the semiconductor opportunity. And, you know, you talked about your first India investment, which happened to be in a firm, in a fabless design firm, and an exit as well. How are you reading this? You're also a member of the ISM, the government set up a board that's going to be looking at semiconductor investments in India. How do you read this opportunity today?
Well, you know, as you know, India has had this tremendous history of just amazing talent in software for the longest time. For decades, India has been known as the sort of the software, you know, infrastructure for the rest of the world. And now I think there's a clear move in the direction towards deep technology focused around semiconductors, and as you know, as we talked about in manufacturing or in drones or other, you know, higher layers of the stack, if you will. But the timing of the Indian focus, Indian government's focus in semiconductor, not just in the factories or the fabs for manufacturing, but also in the fabless area, is profoundly significant, especially if you take into account sort of the global sort of geopolitical issues that we're all faced with in terms of supply chain, in terms of, you know, new sort of applications in the generative AI space. All of these areas bode very well for the Indian opportunity and the Indian ecosystem. And we see tremendous number of companies that are actually leveraging that. And we're glad to be part of, you know, backing, you know, many of them. And we hope to be doing a lot more of that.
Mm-hmm. You know, specifically the India-US partnership, there is an MOU now for the semiconductor space. But there's also a large program that the US is rolling out, you know, to try and get chips manufactured here in the US, courtesy the CHIPS Act, which is a significant incentive program. What are the potential areas of partnership that you believe both sides need to focus on as we move forward?
Well, listen, I think the overall market is becoming hugely important for every consumer, you know, application, devices, all of the things that we use and take for granted. You know, starting from washing machine to cars to refrigerators to telephones and all of these. And so for the longest time, the semiconductor industry was pretty diverse, but over the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's become very concentrated with very few suppliers or very few manufacturing capabilities that exist in the world. And as we all know, TSMC and Taiwan do an amazing job. And a lot of the countries and the governments are actually starting to realize that they need to actually invest in domestic manufacturing, domestic sort of capabilities, because if not for anything else, you know, forget the supply chain issues that we all faced in the last 18 months or so. It's just a core national security initiative. And rightfully so, the U.S. government, you know, was able to pass the CHIPS Act. And I see that sort of happening in every geography. And I think India also will probably have to do to attract more people to actually start new companies in the fabless area. And there's tremendous talent, as I mentioned. And there are lots of investors, you know, including Celesta, that are actually looking at that and saying, how do we actually help create that ecosystem to the actual benefit of the local markets? And increasingly, those companies actually are able to build products for broader use. And it's good for everybody. It just sort of broadens the available pie for everybody and, you know, protects the domestic objectives as well.
Yeah, and we've at least seen one announcement being made here, and that is the announcement of Micron to invest over $2 billion in India as part of this partnership that we were talking about. But Nick, you know, semiconductors, of course, a big space, drones, another area that Celesta is betting on. But you're also betting on bioconvergence, and that brings us to why Mike is here on this panel here this morning. So what's that bet about?
Well, we believe that if you can combine the capabilities and advancements in high tech into the biotech space, that we have an opportunity to significantly increase the pace of development in biotech. We think we have an opportunity to reduce the cost of development and to reduce the cost of diagnostics and other types of capabilities. So we think that this intersection of high-tech and biotech creates an opportunity to transform a lot of what we see happening in biotech and be able to develop products that are beneficial to a larger percentage of the global population.
So what's the problem that Prellis is hoping to solve, Mike?
So today, about 70% of medicines come out of something called biologics, which are large molecules, not the normal small molecules like aspirin you take. And one of the major ways you get those are antibodies. So there's natural things you make. If you get a disease, you make an antibody to it. Well, those have been turned into medicines. And right now, you have to use a mouse with a human immune system. It's a very long, complicated process. So we have a process that comes out of human blood where we actually make lymph nodes, which are the little organs inside people that make these antibodies. And we can print them. So that's the high
3D
tech.
printing. That's the high tech.
It's the part of the high tech is that we can print these lymph nodes, and then we can ask it to make antibodies to what we want. And then on the back end, we're using the generative AI revolution to improve them. So the biology gives us a first generation that's quite good, and then the new generative AI tools make them much better and make them much more drug-like. And so we believe that combination could reduce the cost of making the antibodies as much as tenfold. And therefore, you could go after targets you couldn't go after before and combinations you couldn't. And it should also lower the cost of medicines across the board.
Do you see an opportunity for India to play a role in your plans? Because it is the pharmacy of the world, at least as far as the generic space is concerned. How do you see India fitting into this plan, if at all?
So India is amazing because of its ability to manufacture. Obviously, in the small molecule space, it's been an absolute leader. And I think over time, you'll see these technologies going everywhere. And India's capability to make medicines, its experience in making medicines at scale, I think this will fit right into it and allow India to potentially continue that pharmacy of the world and potentially travel up market to the really higher end applications, which are hard because you need a lot of technologies to come together. And if this makes one of the key technologies more accessible, then it's easier for a country like India to say, well, we don't have to do all the things that you've been doing for 100 years. We're going to leapfrog right to the next generation.
Well, speaking of leapfrogging, Marc, let's talk about the technology that you're focused on at Recogni, and that really has more to do with the automotive space and AI and bringing the two together. So what's the problem that you're hoping to solve?
Yeah, so the problem we're trying to solve is how do you make autonomous driving safe and sustainable? So we really are trying to enable autonomous driving. So the difficulty there is you have all the sensors around the vehicle, and you have to be able to look at the environment around the vehicle and to be able to understand what context you're in. You have to sense vehicles, you have to sense pedestrians, you have to sense lane lines, and we're moving to more and more sensors, and those more sensors require much more compute than is available today. And so that's really needed for safety, to see around the vehicle, to understand where you are so you can make that safe driving decision. But when you add that compute to the vehicle, you also are adding a lot of power into the vehicle, power requirements. So now if we're moving to electrified vehicles and autonomous vehicles, for electrification, if you're putting these autonomous systems on vehicles now, and they're taking the range down of the electric vehicle, that's a big problem. So we are solving the problem of coming up with more compute to make it safer, but also very low power so we can enable sustainability and enable electrified vehicles.